Hi, in this episode we're going to be talking about some basic bonsai tools. So let's open up the kit and see what we got. Okay, so let's open up my toolkit here and we can sort of see what sort of tools I have. I'll go through each of the tools that I have in my toolkit that I use every day, sort of what their purpose is, what they're called, and how I'll use them on my tree. So let me get a couple of these dirt things out of here and we'll get started. Okay, so the first tool I'll explain, or probably the most important tool I have in this kit, is my shear. This one happens to be a made in Japan carbon steel shear, but I'll use this for all my pruning. During black pine season I'll use this for candle cutting, and I'll use this basically to cut smaller branches. If I have to get into a bigger branch, I'll move into a concave branch cutter, just to make sure I don't damage my shear. But this is great for reaching into hard to reach places. It's extremely durable and it's carbon steel, so it stays sharp for a very long time. Probably the next most often used tool I have is the wire cutter. Since I'm wiring all the time, especially with junipers, these come in really handy. Usually I'll hold this in my hand while I wire. That way I can easily snip off the wire once I'm done, once I reach the end, and then I can continue. The small size makes it great. It's also, this one happens to be made in Japan as well, and it's carbon steel, but the scissor handle makes it extremely easy to use, and this sort of blunt tip here ensures that when you cut the wire off of the branch, you won't accidentally dig into the branch and possibly damage the branch or break it. So this is a great wire cutter. Okay, so I got that one. This beast here is just a giant wire cutter. This is great for cutting anything over 3mm wire. The smaller one is great for cutting anything 3mm and less, but once you get into anything bigger, you might damage this wire cutter if you use it, so it's good to have one of these in your toolkit, just so you can cut the really thick wire. And this thing cuts it through like butter. Okay, so now I've got the root cutter, and this is pretty easy and self-explanatory. It's called a root cutter because it's basically used to cut roots. The design of it has this very sharp tip right there. I don't know if you can see it, but that makes it extremely easy to cut roots, and it's easy to cut the root exactly at where you need to. If it's high up in close to where the taproot is, you can get very close with this, and it's extremely sharp, and you don't actually have to apply much force to make a big root cut. So this is great. The other use I use for this tool that most people don't realize they can use it for is for working on gins and deadwood. If you go in at an angle, you can peel away deadwood extremely easy with this tool, just because of how powerful it is and sort of how sturdy it is. So the next tool is a knob cutter, and in this case I've got two different sizes. This is for cutting knobs off of your tree. If you have a cut which may be healed incorrectly, you might get sort of a bulge on the trunk, and that's going to look unsightly. So you'll use this knob cutter to kind of chomp away and create sort of a divot in the trunk. And what happens is when you do that is that the cambium, or the new growth, will appear flat at the trunk instead of having sort of a bulge. So if it'll sort of chomp away, and that's sort of why it's shaped like that. You can kind of see that I have two sizes. The reason is that for some reason the small one, probably because you can sort of give a little bit more torque on it, is a lot easier to chew away at sort of harder deadwood than you can with the larger one. So it's actually better to have a smaller one in your toolkit if you can, as opposed to having a big one. But it's also, good to have two. Okay, the next tool is my concave branch cutter, and I have two sizes of this one as well. I've got my sort of normal size one, and I've got my monster concave branch cutter right here. The way that you can see how it's shaped, kind of angled like that, and what that does is it makes it extremely easy to cut off an entire branch cleanly, right at the trunk or wherever you need it to be, whether it be a secondary branch on a primary branch. This enables you to make that cut flush with that branch. And the two sizes, basically, this will cut an extremely large branch, and this will cut actually the majority of the branches. Both of these are made in Japan, and they're carbon steel, so they're extremely durable and extremely sturdy. And most of the branches I can actually cut with this one, but if I don't want to struggle too much, I'll just bring out the monster concave branch cutter. But it's great. This is probably one of the essential tools to have. Okay, the last of my major tools are the two gym pliers. Now, the reason I have two, well, most people will use the gym pliers, hence the name, for creating gins. And you can typically use this to sort of, when you have a gin, you can squeeze it to separate the cambium from the deadwood, and then you can grab an end and sort of peel away at it to expose sort of the deadwood and the hardwood. That's one way of doing it. For creating gins, though, typically I'll just use one of these and just scrape off the cambium, and it's much safer, it's much easier, but this is the sort of traditional tool for creating gins. What I use this tool more for is for actually bending branches, and that's why I have two. Occasionally I'll have a big branch and I will have applied some heavy wire to it, but I won't be able to bend it with my hand. So in that case, I'll use both of these, grab two ends of the wire, and twist with this to give me a little bit more leverage, and I'll be able to bend that branch into sort of, or give that movement that I wouldn't have been able to if I was just using my hands. So gin pliers are great for creating gins, but they're also great for bending branches. They're also great for just sort of stabilizing something, holding something in place when you're working with the tree. Also, another thing you can use it for is if you're doing guy wire, which I'll explain in another video. If you're using that technique, you can use this to sort of hold the wire and create the guy wire, or tighten it. So those are gym pliers. Pretty essential if you're going into some more advanced techniques. Okay, so then now I've got my repotting stick. This one I just happened to carve myself, but you can use a stainless steel repotting stick. I'll use this for repotting, for loosening soil. It's kind of, just having a little bit thicker and wider and bigger just makes it a little bit more ergonomic when working with a bigger tree. And here's the smaller version right there. And I've got my keyhole saw. And this saw can easily cut through any major branch. So if I can't get through it with the concave branch cutter, it's extremely thick, I'll just pull this out and I'll just cut away at the whole thing. Usually what that'll leave is sort of just a big cut, a flat cut. And then from there, I'll either use my my knob cutter to chew away to remove that sort of cut, or I'll use, if it's a gin, I'll use my gin plier, or I'll use my root cutter here to sort of develop that gin or create that gin. So the keyhole saw is basically a saw. It's for cutting major branches, and it doesn't look like much, but it can cut through a branch extremely quick. Okay, and the last few tools I have a chisel here, and I work with California junipers pretty frequently. So this is a pretty specialized tool. I'll just use this to peel away the bark to expose sort of the deadwood underneath with the chisel. That's mostly the purpose of this. And this, again, I have two sizes. I've got another one here that's just a different shape, and I've got another one here that's a little bit bigger, and each of these all serve the same function. It's to remove sort of the cambium and expose the deadwood when I'm creating gins. And it's just very safe. You just scrape away at it. The danger with using a gin plier sometimes is that when you're peeling away a gin, you'll accidentally overshoot it on the branch and peel too much into the trunk. Usually that's prevented by scoring right around the branch at the trunk, so you don't go too far. But sometimes the gin pliers, that'll sort of happen. So it's much easier to control if you just use some carving tools. Okay, so the tools that I recommend are basically a good shear. You don't have to get a made in Japan carbon steel shear. These sort of get expensive. You can just get a made in China carbon steel, or maybe a stainless steel made in China tool, and those are much more affordable and they serve the same function. The only reason that I went with made in Japan carbon steel is because I use this every day, multiple times per day, and I just need that sort of durability and sort of to keep that edge. But you definitely don't need to get a made in Japan carbon steel tool if you don't want to swing that. Made in China is fine, but a good shear is essential. Next tool is the basic wire cutter, or the big one. The nice thing about having the bigger wire cutter is that you can you can cut the smaller wire too. As opposed to how I have the smaller wire cutter. This one, you sort of get maxed out after 3 millimeters. It gets, you might damage the tool. So it's actually better just to have one big one, and this will cut all your wire sizes. If you're not wiring too much, then you won't actually pull this one out that much. But I do recommend not getting just a regular sort of hardware store wire cutter, because the point on those, it's a little sharp at the tip, and that will always end up cutting right into your branch. Okay, and the last tool I think that everybody should have is just a branch cutter. This is extremely important because you'll be cutting branches when working with your bonsai tree all the time, and you just want something that'll make that nice clean cut and make it easier for you to make the branch cut without struggling, and that's what the concave branch cutter is for. If you end up using your shear, if you have to, make sure you try to cut it to here at the closest part to the joint, to give you the most sort of leverage when you're cutting it. That way you don't damage the tip. But if you have to cut a thick branch, it's always best to use a concave branch cutter. That's what they're designed for, so I would definitely recommend one of these. So in short, if I were just to have 3 tools in my entire toolkit that I think I could get away with working on a tree, any tree, and I could only bring the 3 tools, I would bring these 3. It would be the shear, you got the shear, and then the wire cutter, because you'll have to be cutting wire, and then a concave branch cutter. If I just have even just these tools here, I can almost work on any of my trees, assuming I don't have to make any major cuts, and that's why this comes in handy. So generally those are the tools that I have in my bonsai toolkit. Everybody's toolkit is going to be different, but those are sort of the ones that I like to use. I know I ran through that a little bit fast, but in later videos I'd like to go in more detail and more depth of how to actually use the tools on the tree and give you a nice demonstration on each of the tools individually. Hopefully that was informative, and please feel free to give me a like if the video was helpful, and please subscribe if you'd like to see some more. Thanks for watching.